All right. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Today, with our School Board Academy, we have the pleasure of being joined by Ryan Brann from the Leadership Institute. Ryan currently serves as the Director of Communications Training, helping facilitate trainings related to public speaking, debate, and speech writing. Before this, Ryan served as the Leadership Institute Regional Field Coordinator. His tasks involved engaging with college students throughout the country, helping invite speakers, and establishing conservative clubs on campus. Ryan first became involved in politics in 2015, working as an intern for the Maine Republican Party. In both 2016 and 2017, he returned to the Maine GOP, serving as their intern coordinator. And after graduating from the University of Maine in the spring of 2018, he was hired as state field director for the Sean Moody for Governor campaign. In 2016, he ran as a House candidate for his state legislature, earning one of the highest vote counts as a Republican in a deep blue district. Ryan is going to be speaking with us today about blocking and bridging tough questions on the campaign trail. So without further ado, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us, and let's get started.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Zach and FreedomWorks and your B.E.S.T program for having me. And thank you to the attendees who are viewing from home. I know it's a Tuesday, middle of the day. You guys have lives, you're busy people, you have things to take care of. So the fact that you're here right now to take a political and communications training is a testament to how serious you are about your cause and what you're trying to make for change. So thank you for being here. I have a presentation for you all today, so I'd love to get to it. It's specialty made just for you guys here at B.E.S.T. So what I'd like to do is fix the camera real quick. Apologies on that. I'd like to get started. So let me share my screen. Get this ready. And if you have any questions throughout the time of the actual presentation, I'd love to answer whatever I can and be helpful. So 1 minute, please. Here we are. We'll share this. And then let me enable my sound. We have some videos to watch as well. I always like the videos. It's good to have something visual, an anecdote to hold on to. So it's always good. So let's begin. And if you guys can't see this, again, just message in the chat. I'll make sure we can fix it as we go along. But as Zach mentioned, today, I think I'm one of the final lectures in this series, second to last, if not last, I think second to last. And this is a presentation on blocking and bridging. Now, blocking and bridging is an important concept when it comes to political communications. A lot of people who never run for office before or are unfamiliar with politicking, whether you wanted to just be in the corporate world, these are strategies that everyone uses. It's not unique to just one side. It's a form of tech that people use, and you really have to utilize if you want to be effective. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, a shameless pitch for my organization. I work for the Leadership Institute. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan educational foundation, headquartered here in Arlington, Virginia. It's a little cold today, and also apologies for my voice. I have terrible seasonal allergies. You guys ever see the before and after photos for like a Claritin commercial? This morning, waking up, I was the before photo, but I've got a heavy dose of some antihistamines, and I'm feeling great. I'm feeling, basically normal again. So once that wears off in about 6 hours, I'll return to my sneezing fit. That is the springtime allergy season. But for now, you got me at my best. So congratulations. A couple of things that hit is that, our mission statement as organization at LI is to increase the number and effectiveness of conservative activists in the public policy process. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing here. We care about getting people involved, championing the principles of individual rights, parental rights, limited government, basically, what it takes to keep the privileges and rights and things we have now for future generations. So that's what we do at LI, and we offer lots of really great resources. This is a screenshot of our website. If you go on to Leadership Institute training, we have 47 different types of trainings available. My division is the communications training division. So we offer an assortment of different comms trainings, things like speech writing, things like debate workshops. Actually tonight, once I'm done with this lecture for B.E.S.T, from 5 to 8 p.m. here at our headquarters, we're doing a debate workshop. We have a couple candidates. I think there's a couple of Virginia candidates who are running for office who are going to be attending. It's a great workshop. It's really good to hone your messaging and how to handle yourself in a debate, but we offer lots of trainings. We have media trainings, on-camera trainings. A few weeks ago, we held a public relations school that dealt with crisis communications, how to work with bookers, basic media interview techniques, how to pitch yourself for broadcast, stuff like that. We do written communication workshops as well. We do public speaking workshops in my division. Again, shameless pitching for myself here. They're wonderful workshops. I attend all of these trainings as a manager, so I can attest to how wonderful they are. So feel free to check that out. We do a lot of stuff in person. We have a lot of hybrid trainings as well, or some stuff on demand. But moving into the actual lecture content, the meat and potatoes of what we're here to talk about today, we're talking about blocking and bridging, but we need to do a little bit of background work before we can hop into the actual block and bridge, which we can explain a little later. We're going to talk a bit about political technology, and political technology breaks down into two major parts. We have organizational technology and we have communications technology. And both of these things are crucial. When you look at anyone who wants to run for office, the biggest mistake a lot of people make is that because they think that they're the ones championing, the more moral idea, that they're on the right side of history, that they are philosophically correct in everything they believe, that they're obligated a victory on election day. And it happens from school board races all the way up to president. It doesn't matter what you're running for. If it's an election, it's one of the biggest mistakes a lot of new people to politics makes, is that because they're the ones with the right ideas, that fate itself owes them a victory. And that's simply not true. That's not true. What makes someone effective in politics are these types of political technologies. And these political technologies are philosophically neutral. What I mean by that is that philosophically neutral in the sense that it doesn't matter if you're someone on the fringes of the left, the fringes of the right, or just someone in the middle. The methods and strategies required to be effective in the public policy process are going to be the same. It's like you're a carpenter and a hammer is a hammer to anyone, regardless of what particular job site you're working on, or a saw is a saw, it's a tool. Political technology is types of tools. Specifically, it's the techniques associated with organizing and communicating to achieve campaigning ends. So, understanding this is a bit of a background here. It's important to realize that as candidates, as people who want to support candidates for different races that you guys are participating in, it's crucial that you guys keep learning and understanding what these techniques are to be effective in your own communities. So by virtue of you guys being here today, it's a testament to that. You should continue doing that, because if you don't utilize this stuff, your opposition or people you're opposing will, and the winners are the people who do these methods more effectively. It's what they are. And this is important because, again, your political technology, your organization communication technology determines your political success. Blocking and bridging is a form of political technology, right? It's a form of communications technology, right? It's managing your messaging. And it isn't just unique to politics. You'll see blocking and bridging everywhere. Any PR specialist, you go to the corporate landscape, if you work for a large company, they do these things all of the time. It's how they handle messaging. But it's just is more obviously seen a lot in the political world, just because it's used by everyone. So if you don't utilize these techniques, your opposition will. So it's important to know what these are. And before we get into what blocking and bridging is, I'd like to share a video. It's a cautionary tale. It's something to warn you not to do while you want to go and run for office or do whatever you want in the public policy process. And that is people who don't utilize these communications techniques. And this woman is Natalie Bennett of the Green Party. And she had a car crash interview on the LBC. It's English, Britain. And she did a really poor job. And just before we get into what the good strategies are, let's just see what you should not be doing, and we'll talk about it.
The third key theme is the Greens will ensure everyone has a secure, affordable place to live. How would that be brought about?
Well, a couple of things that we want to focus on.
We'll play it again.
On here, in terms of council housing, we want to build 500,000 new social rent homes. That means council.
Where will you get the money from for that?
Well, what we want to do is fund that, particularly from removing the tax relief on mortgage interest for private landlords. We have a situation where private landlords at the moment are basically running away with a situation of hugely rising rents. They're collecting large amounts of housing benefit.
But how much would that be worth, the mortgage relief for private landlords?
Well, that's part of the whole costing of all of this.
Yeah, but how much will that bring? I mean, the cost of 500,000 homes, let's start with that. How much is that going to be?
Right, well, that's you've got a total cost that will be spelt out in a manifesto.
So you don't know?
No, well,
no, you don't. Right. So we don't know how much those homes are going to cost, but the way it's going to be funded is mortgage relief from private landlords. How much is that worth?
Right. Well, what we're looking at in terms of the figures here, what we need to do is actually we're looking at a total spend of 2.7 billion.
500,000 homes, 2.7. What are they made of? Plywood.
But basically, what we're talking about is 500,000 new homes, and basically each £1 spent on this brings back £2.40.
Yeah, but what is the total cost of 500,000 homes?
It's about a cost of 60,000 per home.
60,000 per.
Mm-hmm. Because what we're talking about is the opportunity
but
for.
That can't include the land.
Well, what we're talking about is what we want to see is the possibility of homes being built.
That's not much more than a large conservatory. £60,000. So where's the land? How are you going to pay for the land?
Right. Well, what we're looking at doing is basically.
Are you all right?
Sorry, yes. As you can probably hear, I've got a huge cold.
I'm terribly sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So what we need to do is basically
get this.
So that's enough of that. We'll skip forward. So, I want to ask, what are your thoughts? Initial critiques. You all listen to it. I want to hear what you think. We have a few people here. What was she doing wrong? We so often see people who are so schooled in the techniques of dipping and dodging and diving and blocking and bridging that we are unused to seeing car crashes of an interview like this. So we have a couple people commenting. We have car crashes being generous. She did not do her homework. Gary, I'd agree with you. Susan Cox said she's not prepared. I would also agree with you there. There's a lot wrong. First of all, when you're speaking to someone in an interview, when you're trying to go and pitch yourself as a candidate, one of the things you need to do is you need to sound authoritative. You're an expert, that you know what you're doing, that you are here with a reason, that reason, the material facts involved with the cause that you're championing, and you can speak on it. She couldn't. Now, it isn't to say that you're not going to have tough questions. Everyone has tough questions. You're not an expert in everything. And if you can't hear too well, how about this? I'll move my microphone. I'm using a Rhodes microphone, but the cable is a little short. Could you hear a little bit better now? A little bit better? We'll put in the chat again if you have issues. I'll see if I can fix that. Great, everyone's hearing all right. But the point being is that she was not prepared. And a big mistake a lot of people make when they're new to politics or first getting involved is they assume that an interview with a journalist, maybe a question from someone, is like a conversation that you have with a friend. It isn't. You are not having a conversation with a friend. You are not there to go and have a back and forth. How was your weekend? How about that football game? Look at the Patriots, look at them go. How wonderful are they? Whatever team you're championing. No, that's not what you're here for. You're here to pitch yourself as a candidate. They're here as an interviewer or as a journalist or whoever you may talk to pose questions and extract information. They're trying to get info out of you, right? And it isn't always necessarily malicious. They could just be trying to get info because they agree with you and want to have a good story for their readers, or they could be hostile to you and they're trying to catch you sounding unflattering and make a story against you, and they're trying to give you a tough question to catch you flat-footed. But this isn't a conversation. And a lot of people who are looking to run for office who are unfamiliar with this, they'll come in and treat it like they're on the phone with their friend or their mother or their grandmother, and they'll just speak without any, cognition of that. And that's dangerous, because when you treat it like a conversation, you allow yourself to be led anywhere the interviewer or questioner would like to take you. When you look at a lot of different debate trainings, this idea of loaded questions are people who, by asking a question of itself, sort of guides you to a particular response as a way to kind of pigeonhole you into responding in ways that are unflattering. And it happens everywhere. It happens not just in politics, but the corporate world, but it happens most often in politics, because a lot of times elections are zero sum. Either you win or your opponent wins. It's not always a happy ending for everyone. And because of that, you have a lot more nasty style interviews. But again, this isn't a conversation. If I had to make a metaphor for you just listening at home, I would make a comparison for where, when you're talking to journalists or responding to questions, it is not to be considered similar to riding in a tube behind like a boat on a lake. So imagine the interviewer is the one driving the boat and you're riding in the tube on like a rope. I'm from Maine, so I grew up on lakes and stuff. So maybe this analogy is weird, but that's not what the interview is like. You're not simply being led along, thrown which way or wherever at the will of the interviewer. It takes two people to have a conversation. You're an active participant. You should be engaging with them. You should be controlling where the flow of the conversation goes and steering back to the messaging that you'd like to illustrate as a candidate. You're there to promote yourself, why you're here. And if you don't take that active role, you will be subject to the whims of whoever wants to ask you questions. And that's dangerous territory. So it's just really important to acknowledge that as we move forward. So blocking and bridging, talk about talking points. Before you can block and bridge, you first need to establish your talking points. Now, your talking points are pre-established messages you wish to convey to a target audience. Now, the question is, what is your target audience? Well, for those of you running for school boards, it would be the voters. It would be the people who live within your voting areas, your voting districts that you want to win the support of, that you want to have vote for you. That is your target audience. So when you're responding to questions, and you're talking to people, whether it's at a Q&A function or at a debate or something like that, always keep in mind with your responses who your audience is, because your audience is who you're trying to persuade to get to vote for you. Isn't a conversation, it's a matter of persuasion for your campaign. So something important to take note of. Now, blocking and bridging, moving forward on this idea of talking points, how to draft your talking points. I've got some tips for you that we can work through here. So first of all, is when you're making your talking points, it's helpful to use examples to allow people to better visualize your point. Now, people, we're creatures of stories. We greatly enjoy storytelling. When you look at some of the best speeches ever written in the last 100 years, or really, I guess, throughout human history, it involves stories. It involves something tangible, concrete, that the listener can latch on to and understand. And that makes it a much more powerful point. Examples to help visualize the point of the reader. So let's say maybe you are a parent and something happened in your school district. You can tell that story to really make it a concrete, tangible example of a larger problem that's happening within the school district. That's something that you can bring up. Comparisons are another important piece as well. You want to show that you're reasonable, that your position is reasonable. Like when you weigh your goals compared to the others, you're actually the one that makes a lot more sense and you're a lot more reasonable. In the weighing of the options. Maybe there's other people who have a lot more extreme positions than you, and you were just the sound voice and mind in the room, and you can illustrate that by showing comparisons of your policy to someone else, what you wish to do if elected. Another important piece here is applying data. Data is a crazy thing. The human mind, we have a hard time with really large numbers, with big numbers. We can't really visualize it well for us. An example I like to use for the data is when we talk about, an issue, let's say the national debt. Let's say that we're, 20 something trillion dollars in debt. We're $29 trillion in debt. How many zeros are in a trillion? Do any of you guys know? It's a lot. It's a lot of zeros. It's a huge number. We really can't visualize that. It's tough to grab onto. So instead, when you're talking about your talking points, you should be molding them to apply any statistics or data that you might have to an individual or to a household. Instead of saying that we owe, $28 trillion in debt, what you should say instead is, well, each American citizen, each taxpayer, make it even more broad, each a citizen, a new person born today will owe $90,000 in debt just by virtue of existing here in the United States as a citizen. It's a lot easier to see $90,000 per person in owed debt than $28 trillion per country. right? It's just a big number. It's hard to grasp onto. So you should be applying these principles for your talking points. If you have something that's sort of hard to understand, you should be drilling it down onto that bite-sized nugget that persuadable voters can really grab onto and understand. And another piece is share a personal anecdote that is something that shows you understand and you care. There's a really good point that says, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care, which is true for where, you could be the smartest guy in the room, but if you look like you are just not there for the right reasons, you really aren't interested, you're just playing the part, they won't really trust you. You need to show the emotional appeal, that personal anecdote, to show that you have something, real deep to you that makes you want to champion the cause, that you're there for good reasons. And a lot of you who want to run for school boards, my guess is that many of you maybe have children that are currently in the school system. That's an immediate credentialing right there. It says, yeah, I care. I have kids. You don't want to, nobody ever questions. Obviously, you love your kids. It's just, you just love them so much. They're in the school system. By virtue of loving my kids, I care about the school system. That's a really good personal anecdote there, talking about maybe your own experiences with your children that you can use when drafting your talking points. And really good stuff there as well. So moving forward, and, another thing too, when we're talking about these things, actually, before we move forward, is that you have to understand that most of these voters or people in the district, they don't know everything. They're busy people. They have lives. They have to get dinner ready. They have jobs. They have their own kids to worry about. They have their own private lives. They're not going to be privy to all of the information of the day. It's this idea for where if they want to be up to date on everything, it could cost them 5 hours a day of just reading the news, local news. That's extremely costly. Most voters don't do that. Most voters really only understand what you can effectively tell them and let them know about that is an issue. If there's an issue happening in the district, you have an obligation to tell them about it and then tell them why you have a solution. And that's what you should be arguing for. So blocking and bridging, we're going to talk a little bit about the block, the first half of the block and the bridge. One of the most important parts of the block and bridge is the block, and described as, the block is the act of limiting conversation from going off topic or into hostile subject matter. And the block, again, doesn't necessarily have to go with just, people think of blocking as someone gets a really tough question and they don't want to answer that tough question, so they try to pivot into something different. Not necessarily true. A block could simply have to do with someone who asks you a question that's completely unrelated to what you're there to do, the issue of your candidacy. If you're getting answered questions from people or getting asked questions from people and they ask you about the war in Ukraine, has nothing to do with your school district, really. Why is that important for you to comment on? It takes you off message. And this is important because, regardless of whether or not you're an incumbent running for your seat, regardless of how much money you have raised, the one constant that every candidate who's running for office has is time, right? You have 24 hours in a day. That's it. You can't magically give yourself 30 hours in a workday. You have 24 hours. It's a constant that's there. That's the same for everyone. And the issue is that when you're getting close to the election day and the day when people cast their votes, is that you only have so much of this time. And any amount of that time you spend not addressing the issues of the voters and pitching yourself as a candidate effectively is wasted time. So if you have, you're doing an interview with a journalist and they want to go and spend half the interview talking about topics in good faith, but they're asking you questions that have nothing to do with what the voters care about in the district, that's wasting your time. And you're losing a chance to persuade voters to your cause. And that's not good. So the block isn't just for hostile questions, although it is used for that as well. But really, it's for getting what is an unrelated or ungermane conversation point being introduced and then preventing it so that you can transition into a related topic in one of your talking points. And it's important to block effectively. And a successful block starts with the acknowledgement of the question. A successful block, I'm going to repeat it, starts with the acknowledgement of the question and then followed by a redirect. You are not simply to just ignore the question wholeheartedly and talk about what you want to talk about. I mean, many of you people here who are parents, I'm sure if you guys have had teenagers, teenagers are experts in blocking and bridging, or really just the bridging, I guess. They come home late at night. Let's say you had a curfew of 10 p.m. for your 16-year-old, and they show up at 11:30, and you're waiting in the living room, and they walk through the door, and you stand up and you say, "Where were you tonight?" And their response is, "It's a really nice haircut. Did you get a new haircut today? I think you look wonderful." What they're doing is they are ignoring your question and trying to move the topic of conversation. I know I certainly did it when I was a teenager, to the annoyance of my parents. I'm sure you've experienced it if you had kids. You don't have to be teenagers. A lot of young kids do the same thing. It just happens. But if you want to block effectively, you need to have that acknowledgement of the question. It's extremely important, because if you don't acknowledge the question, and we should talk about that in a later slide, it can look really bad for you. So after the acknowledgement of the question, we have a redirect. The redirect can take many different forms. It doesn't have to be limited to the 3 I provided at the bottom of this slide, but these are just examples that are useful redirects that you can use to pivot and segue into ultimately a bridge later on, which is your talking point. So one example of a redirect is, they ask you a question like, "Hey, what do you think about inflationary policy or monetary policy for the US government?" Not something you know much about. And what you can say is, "Well, that's not my area of expertise, but what I can say is X, Y, and Z." Go into your talking points. Or, "That is an important point, but it also relates to a larger issue, which is," and then segue into your talking point. Or, "That is one way to think about it, but another way is X, Y, and Z," your talking point. It can take many different forms, and these are just a couple examples here. And in blocking and bridging, it's important to acknowledge that initial question, because a failure to properly do so can be perceived a bunch of different ways, one of which is rude. You're just rudely ignoring what someone is asking you. It can make you seem defensive. When you seem defensive, it makes a question of whether or not you actually know what you're talking about. It makes you seem inexperienced if you don't properly acknowledge the question before you work into your redirect. You just don't know what you're talking about. Or even worse, it could be a question of your character. It can make you seem untrustworthy. It can make you seem like a dirty politician. The ones for where they're just a smooth talker, used car salesman type of person, for where they're just trying to wiggle you into an outcome, very overtly done in a very overtly way, and just gross. Doesn't look good. And I'd like to show you a couple of clips of just really bad blocking. So we're going to click forward here. This lovely gentleman here, if I can grab my notes very quick, he's from Canada. It's the Alberta Health Services President and Chief Executive Officer, Stephen Duckett. And he was approached by the Edmonton media outside a critical meeting to discuss the state of Alberta healthcare. The meeting took place, and he tried to slip out after the meeting and did a really poor job of the block and redirect here. So let's watch.
Excuse me, Mr. Duckett, do you mind just taking a few minutes with me just to answer some questions? I think people do want to hear directly from you, though. Is there a chance that you could just speak with us just for a second?
No, we've got
I don't need a quick.
What do you think of Raj Sherman's criticism of AHS and criticizing that you've been making medical head decisions?
Sorry?
Don't you think of Albertans want to hear what you have to say, Dr. Duckett? Well, we'll wait for you to finish.
Do you have a response to some of the criticism that MLAs are directing directly at Alberta Health Services?
I'm still eating my cookie.
Okay, well, we'll give you a second.
Right,
yeah.
We've got a meeting to go to, so.
He's eating his cookie.
Can you explain why you won't stop and talk?
I'm eating a cookie.
I mean,
We can wait. We don't mind waiting. Is there any way that you just for a minute, just to take I think people are interested in hearing from you, sir.
I'm interested in eating my cookie.
Isn't it rather ridiculous that you're talking about eating a cookie when the associate minister is talking about a cookie?
We have issued a media advisory which says the media is available to talk in about 30 minutes. Isn't it ridiculous that the media are not prepared to go to the media scrum? And I'm eating my cookie.
But I think people are interested in hearing from you as the head of Alberta Health Services.
Right this way.
Oops, right. We're going to cross the road.
Is this a problem that can be fixed in 4 years, sir, do you think?
Have you heard my answer? What did I just say?
Well, I think people want to hear from you. Is it acceptable that they're having to wait 4 years?
Did you hear what I just said? I said I'm eating my cookie.
that the image you're wanting to portray to Elburns, that you're eating a cookie? Like, these are serious problems that have been talked about and raised.
Hopes it was a good cookie. All right. So before we start this second one, thoughts, people in the audience, what do you feel about that exchange there? Would you give a health secretary a cookie? That's right. That's right. This was a very viral clip, by the way. I think it's from 2010, so it's a few years back. Really, the early days of the internet, and it caught like fire. First of all, that's a darn good cookie. Certainly not an oatmeal cookie. I would assume chocolate chip. I'm not sure what your preferences are, but it's by no means a granola cookie. It has to be something with some sweets in it to really enjoy eating so greatly. What I think is that what he was really doing in this scenario is that he knew he was going to have tough questions. He tried to slip out the back door, and as a immature tactic, he thought he could avoid scathing questions from reporters by saying he was eating something. So he just grabbed a cookie on his way out. And he melted that cookie, by the way. Look at how much he actually ate by the time he walked into the next room. It was, a toddler's portion of a bite from the bottom of it, really, just pretending to nibble. It's like when you see someone from high school that you don't want to talk to in a grocery store and you pretend you're on your phone as you walk by, a ploy. He was trying to cast one over on the journalist there to avoid the tough questions. And it's just bad. What he should have done is stopped, said, hey, we're talking about this later, acknowledge the question, say, there was supposedly going to be a big press release later on. He should have just acknowledged the question, sat down with them, taken it seriously, say, I don't have much to say right now, go into a couple of his talking points as to what they're going to be releasing later, acknowledge the concerns of the people who wanted to hear from him, and then end the conversation right there. But instead, it was like a Band-Aid that is slowly pulled off, just very, very slowly and painfully, just teeting along. And it was just bad. It's what you should not be doing. Please don't do that. You are people of character by virtue of taking this FreedomWorks training. I know that you are people of character, and I have a lot of hope that you will never do something like this. So that's right. And actually, Gary's point, what a great meme for the opposition at his next election, the Cookie Man. He was the Cookie Man, the Cookie Monster. I would go even further and call him the Cookie Monster. It became a meme. It became a meme. A lot of people for where if you had a tough question, didn't want to answer, as a joke, an homage to this clip, someone would say, well, I'm eating a cookie. It's quite a while though, but it's just one thing of what you should not be doing. Hundreds of different ways to properly, shut down hostile questions and acknowledge the importance of it. And he did none of these things. He certainly did not take a FreedomWorks or LI training. I can tell you that. So we know what not to do there. I have another clip here, and it is the CEO of Cadbury's chocolates or candies. And he has a really bad interview, but it isn't as hostile as an interview as the last one, but still bad. So let's watch this one.
Meantime, the gum wars are erupting on Wall Street, also in the candy aisle. Brad Irwin is the North American president of Cadbury. He's the candy man, and he's here to talk to us about what are some of the forces facing this industry right now. Brad, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
All right. We've been talking about cocoa prices, for one, how that's a market where you've seen some huge price increases. We've been wondering how that's been affecting you, cocoa prices, but also other commodities. What's that mean for Cadbury's bottom line?
Well, we're full steam ahead on our business right now, and things are going quite well. So we're optimistic about the future.
But what about commodity prices? They are increasing. How do you deal with some of those higher prices?
Well, we, as you say, one of the things we do is we innovate our products to improve them and offer better value. And one of the products we have now is Trident Extra Care.
Like what things? If cocoa prices increase, let's say, by 75% over the course of the year, how do you...
The cocoa prices. Tell us about the cocoa.
Dealing with those costs.
Well, I can't speculate on what, cocoa prices may or may not do in the future.
Well, that's what they have done over the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, what we try to do is to innovate our products, offer new products with better value.
Just offer great. You just offer great
continue
products.
to grow our business.
Just offer great products at reasonable prices that taste really good, Brad. Don't have any comments on anything happening in the industry at large. Can we ask you about competitors? Is that a fair question, or we won't get an answer there either?
What would you like to know?
Well, just what about the gum wars? We've been sitting here looking at some of the gum we have on set. That's a pretty tough industry right now. I know the gum wars have been going on for quite a while with Wrigley. You guys are basically the two companies that are in this area. How do you try and take on Wrigley with gum offerings?
Well, we've had a pretty good run on gum in the past few years. The market's grown, and we've grown share of that market. And one of the ways we do is innovate, and we have a new product called Trident Extra Care, which is
yeah, we heard about that.
Yeah, it is a product that has actually calcium in the gum that actually strengthens and rebuilds your teeth.
Functional gum.
Functional gum, that's right.
Do people buy it because of that or because it tastes good?
Well, both.
That's enough of that. That's all we need to hear for that piece there. So don't you feel gross? I'm gonna have to put a pause on this training real quick, take a quick shower, and just clean myself of the stickiness of that interaction. That's the one for where they're smiling at you, they're nodding their head, they seem like they're present in the conversation, but it's just a cave of a head behind those eyes, just empty. No real resolve to actually answer the question whatsoever. That's also terrible. That's a friendly version. You know, the video we watched before of the Alberta, he was a lot more hostile to the interviewers. In fact, I think he actually took his cookie and pushed it in the face of a reporter as he was walking away, to which she turns around to her coworkers and says, "Did you just put a cookie in my face?" Pretty hostile. But with this clip, he's smiling at you, nodding his head, acting like he's friendly, like he's part of the conversation. And he really didn't answer anything, though. He had no real effective blocking and bridging techniques there, specifically the blocking portion. He just completely ignored the question. He didn't acknowledge any of the original question, had no meaningful attempt to. And that was bad. That was really, really bad. So another example of what not to do. Let's talk about the bridge. The bridge, defined of the block and bridge. The bridge is the act of introducing a new topic or talking point favorable to the campaign, which I put campaign, but it could be to you specifically, could be to your cause, favorable to whatever it is you want it to be favorable to. So you may be favorable to you as a candidate. And it should be a smooth transition. So you've had your block, you have your redirect, you block where you acknowledge the question, your redirect, and then you transition that into your talking point. It should be a smooth transition. Practice makes perfect, of course, but that's the proper flow of this. So let's watch a clip of a good example of blocking and bridging. So obviously Kaylee McEnany, I always say her last name incorrectly, but she is like one of the experts at doing this. Regardless of what you think of politics, a good place to see this being done is in the White House press office. The press secretary, people who are responding to questions from reporters. By the way, it doesn't matter who is president, what team is in charge. The PR people for the president, their job is to spin the news in the most favorable light of the chief executive, no matter what. So I think it's funny how a lot of people who just hated the White House press office before, now that their team's in charge, suddenly love it. They're paid propagandists for the government. It's what they are at their core, really. Doesn't mean it's bad necessarily. It just means that you should understand what you're working with. They're there to spin the news in the most favorable way of the administration possible. That's what their job is. They're not there to do anything else. They aren't some neutral arbiters of the facts. So it's just something to understand. And Kaylee is extremely good at handling hostile questions. She's a pro. And you really can't think of any other, media climate. Pretty much every journalist in that room that she's responding to questions to is generally hostile. They're not super friendly towards the administration. So every day she's answering several dozen super tough questions back and forth. It's like a shootout for which she got bang, 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 back and forth, handling these tough hits. And she does a really good job at it. You can watch any clip of her to see a good example of blocking and bridging. We're going to watch a quick minute, a clip I took out specifically for this, but really just Google any of her responses when she was at the White House. She was a pro at this. So let's watch this clip.
security and permanent merit-based reforms. So that is something he would work with Congress on. Yeah, and the executive order would pertain to the merit-based portion of that.
A second question on the schools. The vice president talked about some of the new guidelines or new pages of documents for CDC coming out this week. Is that still the plan? Are those going to come out this week? Is there any chance that this is being rethought at this time?
So those are CDC guidelines you're referencing. So I'll leave it to CDC as to when those guidelines come out. But we really would like to see schools open. As has been clear, we don't think our children should be locked up at home with devastating consequences when it's perfectly safe for them to go to school, as emphasized by many medical experts. So the president is very keen on seeing schools reopen. It's the only thing that's fair to America's children. Yes.
She effective block. She didn't want to comment on what the CDC was doing. It wasn't her place to say, but she redirected and positioned to her talking points, saying that schools need to be open. Right? It was a question about CDC guidelines, and she blocked it where she needed, and then pivoted into her talking points, saying on this issue of schools and CDC requirements, we can't have children being put in this situation indefinitely. We should be opening things up again. So really, really effective maneuver there. You can watch any clips. She is a pro at it. But I have another clip here, and this is of Newt Gingrich. And I believe this was from the 2012 presidential primary for president. You have a couple of GOP candidates on the stage. It's a debate stage. It's a CNN debate stage. And the opening question was a driving attack of the moral character of Newt Gingrich. And his response was a very good response. So we're going to watch this one as well.
We learned he, not Governor Romney, won the Iowa caucuses. There were 5 podiums on this stage when the sun came up. 4 now because of Governor Rick Perry's decision to drop out. And just as Speaker Gingrich surged into contention here in South Carolina, a direct, fresh character attack on the Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to start with that this evening. As you know, your ex-wife gave an interview to ABC News and another interview at the Washington Post, and this story has now gone viral on the internet. In it, she says that you came to her in 1999 at a time when you were having an affair. She says you asked her, sir, to enter into an open marriage. Would you like to take some time to respond to that?
No, but I will. I think the destructive, vicious, negative nature of much of the news media makes it harder to govern this country, harder to attract decent people to run for public office, and I am appalled that you would begin a presidential debate on a topic like that.
And we'll keep it there because I know we're getting shorter on time. We only have a couple minutes left, and I have a few more things to show you. But the emotion of your response is important. Now, you don't want to get mad, except if it's on purpose. The goal here is to meet emotion with emotion. And the example of Newt Gingrich is a good one because it is an example of questioning his character. It had to do with his, marital relations. And when we talk about politics, people running for office, if someone isn't even faithful to their spouse, it's hard to imagine a voter wanting to vote for them, wanting to cast their vote for them. You question the character of someone who's in charge of, the reins of power for government. How can you trust them if they're not even faithful to their family, to the people they live with? And it's a huge, broad, strong moral implication against him. So because of that, you can't simply say, no, it's not true, and then move on. You have to meet emotion with emotion when it comes to those extreme examples. You very unlikely will have to experience those types of things, but if someone gives you a really cutting question like that, you have to meet that emotion with emotion. The LI, we have the laws of the public policy process. It's a write-up available on our website. There are 45 different laws, useful, pithy, things that you can kind of work with that can guide you through your time in politics. And rule number 3 on these 45 laws is don't get mad except on purpose. Don't get mad except on purpose. Normally when you get mad, you lose control of your messaging. You could say something embarrassing to yourself, but an example of just an extreme attack like this, you have to meet that emotion with emotion. You can get a little mad on this point to meet that moral outrage with your own moral outrage. Another point here is to never repeat a negative accusation. Never, ever, ever repeat a negative accusation verbatim. If someone says that I stole a cookie from the cookie jar, I'm not going to say, I did not steal a cookie from a cookie jar. What I'm going to say is that those accusations are untrue. You don't want to say verbatim the negative accusation of itself, because the act of you saying it gives a little bit of legitimacy, and it makes people think that, are you being truthful? I have a good example of this, making the best use of our time here with Chris Christie.
Politics ain't beanbag, okay? And everybody in the country who engages in politics knows that. On the other hand, that's very, very different than saying that, someone's a bully. I have very heated discussions and arguments with people in my own party and on the other side of the aisle. I feel passionately about issues, and I don't hide my emotions from people. I am not a focus group tested, blow-dried candidate or governor. Now, that has always made some people, as you know, uneasy. Some people like that style, some people don't. And I've always said, I think you asked me a question after the election, are you willing to change your style in order to appeal to a broader audience? And I think I said no, because I am who I am, but I am not a bully. And what I will tell you is that the folks who have worked with me over a long period of time would, I believe, tell you that I'm tough, but I've shown over the last 4 years in the tone that we've set here that I'm willing to compromise, that I'm willing to work with others.
Now, what do you think happened the very next day in the paper? Well, I'll show you what happened the very next day in the paper. It is Christie, quote, his own words, "I am not a bully." They did the old tricky maneuver there, didn't they? They catch you saying that you are not X, and then they just post you denying that you're X. It is a classic PR blunder to repeat the negative accusation, especially if it's just a ridiculous one, because they'll try to give it legs by virtue of you even acknowledging it verbatim. So you don't want to do that. You absolutely don't want to do that. It's, imagine again, many of you are parents. Imagine if your kid came out just in a rush from like their bedroom, and they just say, "I did not play with a lighter." Why did you even bring that up? Like, what are you bringing up the fact that you're playing with lighters? Are you playing with lighters? You go into their room, you find a lighter. What's going on there? Or if I said something I definitely did not. I'm in the coworker lunchroom of LI. I definitely did not steal your lunch. Didn't steal your lunch. Just walk away. They're going to think, man, this guy stole my lunch. What's going on here? He's repeated it a couple of times. It's exactly what a lunch stealer would say. A lunch stealer would say that they did not steal my lunch. Now I'm questioning their credibility here. You want to just not repeat the negative accusation verbatim. You can deny the accusation. That is simply not true. That accusation is false. But to say it verbatim can oftentimes give it legs and draw unnecessary attention to the accusation itself. And that's really bad. You don't want to do that. My final example here as a final piece to just kind of leave you with some information before you can go to a couple questions about never repeating a negative accusation, deals with Christine O'Donnell. Now, in 2010, she was running for the U.S. Senate as a candidate for Delaware. If my memory serves me correct, in 2008, Joe Biden was, promoted to being vice president with Barack Obama, and he left his Senate seat, and there was someone, interim appointed there. And then there was, of course, an actual election in 2010 to take the seat. And Christine O'Donnell, she was a Tea Party candidate, seemed like a nice lady. She was running for it. But what happened was that during her campaign in 2010, I believe it was Bill Maher, he aired an old clip of O'Donnell from a way back, for where she talked about how she made a dabbled in witchcraft or something to do with the occult. I'm not necessarily sure. I have a couple of screen caps of articles from back then. Christine O'Donnell says one of her first dates occurred in like a satanic altar or something like that. A quote from her later in the article said, "I dabbled in witchcraft. I never joined a coven, but I did. I dabbled in witchcraft. I hung around people who were doing these things. I'm not making this stuff up. I know what they told me to do," she said. This is an old story that she said years prior that was dug up during her 2010 campaign when she was running for Senate. So in response to these accusations being dug up against her in 2010, what do you think Christine O'Donnell did? Any wild guesses? Any wild guesses for the folks who are viewing? She did the exact thing you should not be doing. She repeated the negative accusation, and it resulted in an extremely viral clip that just blew up the internet. It was on, every talk show. It was very, very famous. And we're going to watch that clip. That's right, the I am not a witch. Someone recognizes it. We're gonna watch that clip here. It's only 30 seconds. I'll play it twice, so you get a chance to see it twice. But let's watch this.
I'm not a witch. I'm nothing you've heard. I'm you. None of us are perfect, but none of us can be happy with what we see all around us. Politicians who think spending, trading favors, and backroom deals are the ways to stay in office. I'll go to Washington and do what you'd do. I'm Christine O'Donnell, and I approve this message. I'm you.
I am not a witch.
I'm not a witch. I'm nothing you've heard.
All right, so big mistake, big mistake. This ad inspired many video parodies, one of the most famous being a parody by Kristen Wiig on SNL. In response to this ad, what could have possibly been blown over if she handled it correctly now suddenly became an extremely explosive conversation piece against her campaign. It was not great. It was not great. She did lose. She lost. If my memory serves correct. She didn't end up winning the election. And just a couple of my notes here I wrote down last night in preparation because I thought it's just an extreme case. So Bill Maher apologized to O'Donnell on a show in 2012, stating, "I know when I brought out the witch tape, it made your life hell, and I'm sorry about that. I got to say, I don't agree with your ideas, but it shouldn't have hung on that stupid witch thing." To which O'Donnell accepted the apology from Maher and blamed herself for the I'm not a witch advertisement. So years later, she acknowledged the fact that, yeah, should have never made this ad because by virtue of making this ad, suddenly it brought so much more attention to this negative attack piece against me. And by the way, a lot of the parodies too, if you notice, her background, it's just a moving, perfect, smoky background.
But none of us can be happy with what we see.
Here, we'll mute it so I can talk a little more clearly. It's a moving, smoky background in a dark room. If you listen to the audio, it's piano.
Are the ways to stay in office. I'll go to Washington.
Some eerie piano in the background. A little witch would like. This could be a witch house. You don't know what you're seeing here. You see this ad, and it's like, well, if she was a witch, that's definitely what a witch would say. It is a bit of a witch trial, I guess you could say, in many aspects, but it wasn't a good ad, though. It just ultimately ended up significantly harming her in her election prospects. So that's something you should not be doing, just as a cautionary tale. So, in summary, as we close out this PowerPoint for you all here, political technology is philosophically neutral. Whoever uses it best will win. You are not owed anything in the world of electoral politics or just politics in general. If you don't utilize the organizational and communications technology better than your opponents, they will take the fruits of victory away from you. So you have an obligation to keep practicing, keep learning how to be an effective political actor wherever you see fit, and really make use of that. You want to take an active role when you're answering questions or going in an interview. You don't treat it like a normal conversation. You are not the person on a tube at the end of a rope on a lake being pulled by a boat who is the interviewer, whipping you left and right wherever they see fit. You are a co-captain of that boat. You can help steer where the conversation goes. You're not just left to the will of the interviewer. You want to figure out your talking points in advance. You're running for specific reasons. You know why you're running, why you care about these issues. You should have it written down. You should have thought about this in advance. Figure out what it is you care about. You want to mold those talking points into those different methods to maximize your impact. Show the emotional appeal, make it relatable to you. Break down data to individuals or households. You want to go and just really mold it in a way that can maximize the persuasiveness of voters. If you have a couple thousand voters in a district, and you can make your messaging 10% more effective because you do a better job stating your point, that has huge implications in aggregate for overall vote counts, right? This is a numbers game is what we're doing here. You're trying to convince people to support your candidacy. So when maximize your talking points, little marginal increases in effectiveness have big overall outcomes. A successful block starts with the acknowledgement of the question and then a redirect. You don't want to be eating that cookie while answering a tough questions. Put that cookie away, save it for later. Just acknowledge the question, be a good person. You want to practice those transition sentences. Make sure you have those redirects done really well. You want to meet emotion with emotion. Don't be a robot. You are a living, feeling person, and so are the voters. And if they don't think that you're a living, feeling person, they may not like you very much. And again, if I have to just repeat it over and over and over again until you hate me, don't repeat negative accusations. Please don't. It's just more harm than good. You can address the accusation, you certainly should, but you don't want to repeat it and give it more fire than it really deserves, because it's a lot of times what happens, it'll backfire against you. And with that, that's my entire PowerPoint. So are there any quick questions I can maybe help with, or thoughts or ideas? Again, my name is Ryan Brann with the Leadership Institute, and we offer tons of trainings. Thank you for FreedomWorks for having me. And I'm here to help wherever you guys see fit. So